Hello everybody and welcome to the No Waffle GCSE live. So in this live we're going to be going over GCSE Geography Paper 2 predicted topics. So I hope your maths paper from yesterday went well, your maths paper 2. And this video has come about, I normally don't do predictions for the GCSE papers. However, one amazing viewer decided to send me a predicted paper and I went and looked at the topics. That's what we're going to be doing. Okay. It's lovely to see you guys here. And I was trying to stream on TikTok, but it wasn't working. So unfortunately, it's just going to be YouTube today, which is actually amazing. I'm just typing up the list for the topics or the predicted topics for each section. So bear with me, you can see them on the screen, hopefully. And then once I've typed the list, we'll go through each of the topics individually. And don't worry, for those of you who are struggling with paper 3, that's completely okay. I released a video which not only has all of the things you need to know about the pre-release, but it also has my field work that you can use. Okay, so again, thank you so much for the person who sent me the predicted paper, because now I'm able to do a video about this for you guys. That was really helpful. So I'm just typing up the list of topics, predicted topics, and then we'll start by going through them. Wait, geography is on Wednesday. So what's tomorrow? Oh, what exam is tomorrow? My mic is cutting out. Okay, Hello, just tell me if you can hear me. I think the volume is really bad. Am I really quiet? That's why. Let me sort my microphone out. Hello everybody, I've tried to switch up my microphone. Hopefully you can hear me a little bit better. I've changed the microphone. Thank you for everyone being so patient. I'm sorry about that. Hopefully you can hear me a little bit better. So I realized, yeah, geography isn't even tomorrow. It's that I don't do history and I don't do Spanish, unfortunately. Okay, fine. The predictions from someone sent me a predicted paper, and then that has some topics. So that's what we're going to go over. Perfect. Thank you, everybody, for telling me. They can hear me. That's great. So what we're going to do is, I guess this is for people who don't really do history or Spanish. I'm sorry about that. I'll probably do another geography live tomorrow as well. This is mainly for AQA. So I'm just typing up the topic list of all of the predicted topics. Yeah, my geography videos contain all of the content, so you can 100% rely on it. Did you send me the mark scheme? Let me check. Yes, you did. It's in the document. We'll do a live today for those of you who don't do history and Spanish, and then we'll do another live tomorrow, don't worry. So you can leave if you've got another subject, but I think most of you want to stay here for a reason. So I'm going to finish typing up the list now. Give me a second. You can take note of the topics on the screen now whilst we're going through this. Because I can't go actually through the predicted paper because obviously that's copyright, but I'm just going over the overall topics that's in there. How was your guys' maths exam yesterday, actually? I hope that went well. Oh, today, sorry. Not yesterday. Well, the person who sent me this said that the predictions for the previous paper were correct, so it's likely that perhaps at least some of these topics will be. I would still recommend revising everything, but maybe focus on these. Better than paper one, that's good. Calculated paper is normally better than paper one. Now, I know everybody studies different case studies, so we'll probably choose the most common one and revise like that. Urban transport is the topic where it's talking about, especially if you learn about London. So the cycling scheme that Boris Johnson started, Boris bikes, things like public transport. So it's a whole topic. So I would say take note of these whilst I'm typing them up. It will probably be quite useful. Yeah, thank you very much to the person who shared that. That was really sweet of them, helping all of you guys out. Yeah, don't worry. We'll be doing another night before live. Sorry, I thought the exam was tomorrow. Do you think I can learn all of the paper two topics today and tomorrow? Yep, when I was doing GCSEs, I pretty much crammed everything, so I think you should be able to as well. There's a lot of subjects they ask of you, so. I don't. Okay. Yeah, paper two is mostly your case studies. It's just being able to recognize geography, being able to recognize which case studies you're being asked about. Because there's a lot about low-income countries, and then you get confused which one they're supposed to be asking you about. So make sure you know that. I'm sorry for those who are doing Spanish and history. I don't do either of those two subjects. And then it also depends for section C, it depends on what you have. So you've got food, or which topic do you do, water, energy. So if you do food, I'll keep all the predictions, all of them. So food, I'll try and share this document as well. Can I scroll up, please? Yeah. I'll just open this really big so you can see. I also need to release every single case study and example in geography paper two, so I'll try and release that by today as well. No worries, Mackenzie. It's lovely having you guys here. By the way, you're not answering every question in section C. You have to choose whether you do food, whether you do water, or energy. So you're going to do two of them. So you might do food and water. That means you don't answer the energy questions. No, you only do two. You need to do two, not one. Yeah, it's two of them you do. Paper 2 is a lot more common sense than paper 1 is because you can kind of use your overall knowledge. We'll be going over the content of all of these topics today, and then exam questions will be tomorrow. So I'm trying to keep as many questions on screen as possible. Yeah. Geography is on Wednesday. Sorry, I think my title was very misleading. Pretty much because I thought it was tomorrow. Okay, so that's the list. Make sure you screenshot it. I will make it available at the end of the live, but for now, we'll be going through that and going through the content for that. Okay, so thank you for being very patient, and thank you again to that amazing person who decided to share that with me. You all have them to thank. Yeah, I'm not predicting these. Maybe next year onwards I'll start predicting papers, but unfortunately this year I haven't been too able to do that. It's blurry. I know, because I'm trying to show the whole thing at once. Okay. I'll make the font smaller. Okay. There you go. Is it okay for OCR geography? Yes, it should be. I mean, the predictions might be different, obviously, because it's OCR rather than AQA. I guess these predictions are specific to AQA. Thank you, Saf. Could I attach the document? Yeah, I'll have to do it at the end because it takes a bit of time to do that. Jude, sorry about that. Okay, so let's get started going through the topics now. So we're going to go over revision for these predicted topics. Yeah, it is on Wednesday. I feel like I need to pin someone saying it's on Wednesday. Okay, this is called How to Freak Everybody Out. So section A, which is all about urban issues and challenges. So you may have done you would have done two case studies. A case study of urban growth in a low-income country. So that's Lagos if you've done the main one. And then you can do another case study, which is change in UK cities. You may have done London or Liverpool. Those are the main common ones. So these are what the questions are specifically asking about. So let's go through that content on the whiteboard. Okay, because I know everybody does different case studies. I don't do business studies, unfortunately. Sorry about that, Ahana. Nice name. Okay. So let's start with, let me screenshot this myself. And then I can put this on the whiteboard so you can still see. So, rural to urban migration. So rural to urban migration and megacities. Firstly, what is a megacity? It's important to know your definitions there. So megacities, oh, pen isn't on. Megacities are effectively areas with more than 10 million people living in them. A population of greater than 10 million residents. For example, Mumbai, or a lot of major cities. There are. Is my microphone cutting out? Okay, let me quickly enter and exit to try and fix that. Yeah, maybe I'm just going far away from it, I think. I'll stay close to it. So we've got 10 million, that's what a megacity is, when the population is at least 10 million residents or more. Okay, and rural to urban migration. So this is the different types of migration. You can have urban to rural or rural to urban. So what are the reasons behind it and defining it? So defining rural to urban migration, let's extend this. So rural to urban migration is effectively defined as the movement of people from the countryside to the cities, i.e. from rural areas to urban areas. Now, what is the reason for that? What controls that? Well, there's going to be push factors, i.e. factors that push people out of rural areas, what the downsides of it. And then there's going to be pull factors, factors that pull people towards urban areas, i.e. the perks of living in an urban area. So push factors and pull factors are probably going to be opposites there. So push factors, for example, if there are lots of natural disasters in an area, you want to leave. As people are saying, yep, so when there's low employment or little job opportunity. Another reason could be there's just less resources overall, for example, medical resources, healthcare, education. Conflict, well done. So all of these things are examples of push factors. And then pull factors, you can kind of think about the opposite. So there are more healthcare facilities, there's more education opportunities. Well done, people putting some really good ones here. Better housing, yep, that's a good one. Better job opportunities, going into the tertiary industry, yep. So all of those sorts of things you want to be saying. I.e.,
it can be summed up as people are pulled to urban areas because of the idea of a better standard of living, a better quality of life. And in hopes for that. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get that, but in hopes for that. No, I'm not going to be doing history. I don't cover history, unfortunately. Sorry about that. Okay, so that is going over that. Now, key definition here also is urbanization. So what does urbanization mean? It just it effectively describes this process of people moving from rural areas to urban areas, and also for the rural areas to start turning more urban, more busy, and more city-like. Now, another key idea when you're thinking about rural to urban migration is a type of people moving in these areas. So it's going to be the younger population. So that's quite a downside for rural to urban migration. If younger people are moving because they want more job opportunity, they have more encouragement for life, they then tend to settle in those urban areas. They then have families, and they kind of never go back to those rural areas. So not only are they taking the employment force away, there's less chance of them coming back. The increased percentage of the population living in urban areas, well done, good definition there. Couldn't you talk about, because of this migration, this decreases the death and increases the birth rate? So it's going to increase the birth rate in those urban areas, but in terms of death, I don't know how that would necessarily affect it. Okay. What is the difference between urbanization and urban sprawl? So, urbanization is just the general development of cities, the access to better resources, whereas urban sprawl, as Stefania is saying, I hope that I'm saying your name right. Urban sprawl is the uncontrolled growth of cities. Yeah. So urban sprawl is not wanted, it's unwanted. It's because of the pressure you have to expand and the outward population, whereas urbanization is because of just general development and improvement. Okay, so moving on to the next topic then, which is environmental issues with your low-income country or newly emerging economy. So let me just go back to the predicted paper to see what kind of things they asked about. Okay, so this is for the case study. Counter-urbanization. I've never heard of that. I'll search that up. Counter-urbanization. Counter-urbanization is when large numbers of people move from urban areas into surrounding countryside. So it's the opposite. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. So let's go through this now. Environmental issues. So with this, yep, as people are saying, what you want to do is you want to mention the case study that you learnt. So probably the most common one amongst you is Lagos. Okay. So you got to give an example for that. Some people have studied Mumbai. Yep, every school studies probably different ones. So as long as you have a good variety. So what are some environmental issues with a low-income country, and also with urban growth? So what issues are caused by urban growth in a low-income country and newly emerging economy? So environmental issues. There's multiple that we can speak about. Let's extend this point here. So environmental issues stimulated by urban growth. You can discuss things such as the huge amount of waste being produced. Okay, yep, poor sewage system, good point there. So it says in Lagos 9,000 tons of waste a day was being produced and only 40% of it is officially collected. So what does that mean? Then that then leads to rubbish dumps. And eventually they build up. That takes up space, which you could use for economic development. And on top of that, it causes toxic waste. Well done for everybody answering. I can see some really good points being made there. On top of that, emissions from factories, both air pollution and water pollution is caused by that. So emissions Okay, and what other environmental issues can you have with urban growth in low income countries? You can have traffic congestion, especially in Mumbai. You can see that. But on top of that, in a lot of African countries, not just Lagos, a lot of the cities, there's a lot of congestion. In Lagos, it can be up to 2-hour commutes in rush hours. So that again is producing a lot of carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and also sulfur dioxide as well. Trees broken down for space for homes to be built. Exactly. You can discuss the deforestation in order to cater to the building, the construction of factories, because we're talking specifically about urban growth. I guess you can also talk about construction of just general buildings as well. Okay. Urban growth is not urbanization. So, well, I mean, I guess it's pretty similar. So, urban growth and urbanization. Jude wrote the definition for urban growth. Where is it? Urbanization, sorry, is the increasing percentage of the population living in urban areas. So, urbanization is talking about the increasing population living in urban areas, whereas urban growth is just talking about all the factors affecting the growth. And then urban sprawl is when it's forced, there's forced development onto other areas. Well done, Jude. It's actually quite helpful, Jude, to put the definition, so thank you for doing that. Okay, and yeah, that's probably all of the problems now. So we've answered environmental issues with a lick or knee. Okay, moving on to urban transport strategies. So this is probably one of the most under-revised things because people actually forget that they even studied this topic. I don't know why it's so forgettable. But let's look at this. So urban transport strategies. I'll look at the... So you may have learnt about specific ones. Okay. So this is actually, let me write it here. Urban transport strategies. So there's a lot of transport strategies. If you memorized ones about London, then you may have memorized the Boris bikes, which was introduced by the mayor at that time, Boris Johnson, about this scheme to use biking more. It wasn't actually too effective, but that was one of the schemes. Other schemes include bus priority lanes, i.e., prioritizing lanes which won't experience traffic for buses so that you promote the use of public transport. Oyster cars, yep, that's another one that you can discuss, i.e., subsidizing the or making it more convenient to travel via public transport. You can talk about congestion charge, which I think I saw somebody saying. So congestion charge, I don't know whether any of you experience this. This is effectively when you enter a city centre at peak times, especially in London, you have to pay a certain fee if you're doing it via car. So you're therefore incentivized to go via train or via bus or any other public transport. Parking restrictions is another one. As well. So making sure parked cars don't block the traffic. So effectively, any of these urban transport strategies really incentivize taking public transport, making that prioritizing that, and making everything else non-public transport, i.e., your own mode of transport, which is producing a lot more emissions, as disincentivizing. You don't want to do it. It's extra time, it's extra hassle. Okay. You can also give some examples if you learnt about them in other countries as well. You're not limited to just speak about cities within the UK, so you can speak about other places as well. Can urban transport strategies be a 6 marker? Yes, it can, because look how many points we can make. And as long as you're able to, the question will probably assess your ability to pick up each of them and then your ability to describe the effectiveness of it. So because it's one of the predicted topics, try and revise that as much as you can. Okay, our next topic is looking at urban sprawl and how that has impacted urbanization within the UK. Okay, so this is where you're going to use a case study that you learnt about, or electric buses was a good one for the previous question. So this one is when you're looking at a case study of a city in the UK that you learnt about. So whether it's Liverpool or London or any of the other ones that you may have done. So this is another case study question. Yes, Jude is correct. They wouldn't necessarily just give you a question and ask you to write a 9 marker about it. They'll give you some figures and maybe a table, a picture, or something like that. So you can use those figures to talk about more things. Olympic Park, yeah, that's another one that loads of people have done. Stratford, ironically, that's the one that my school studied as well. Okay, so urban sprawl. Let me bring that up. We can talk about that there. There is, of course, going to be a Kahoot questionable. We can't do a stream without a Kahoot, can we? Urban sprawl, and I'm going to try and be as generic as possible. Yeah, East Village, that's the one I did as well. I guess we did a very similar ones. But I'm going to use the generic Liverpool one because that's the one in the CGP guide, and I know a lot of you use that. So, but I guess these are very applicable. So, firstly, what is urban sprawl? So it's defined. Let me put it here. Urban sprawl is defined as the unplanned growth of urban areas into the surrounding countryside. How long will this be? I mean, we're going quite slowly through these, but we're almost done with section A. So let's try and aim for 8:30, and then we can do a Kahoot then. So yeah, let's try and aim for that. So urban sprawl, to define it, it is the unplanned growth of urban areas into the surrounding countryside. Okay. So let's talk about how that impacts that. This video will be available, and I'm going to do another video going through all of the case studies and examples for paper 2 as well. So urban sprawl, Liverpool. So as Liverpool has grown, it has sprawled, merging into the surrounding urban areas to create the Merseyside conurbation. So conurbation is when there is an area just outside of the urban area, and that's where a lot of the dwellers live. Yeah, building on the green belt, yes, that is urban sprawl, and there's a lot of tight restrictions around that. They don't want you to build on the green belt in London because they want to keep that and retain that. But urban sprawl might happen in other areas, maybe brownfield sites. Don't worry, I'm going to do a video and I'm going to try my best to release it by the end of today. Hello everybody who's coming in. I'm going to try and release the case studies video by the end of today, like maybe later this evening, which has all of the case studies and examples of paper 2, because I think the paper 1 was helpful for you guys, so I'll do that. Okay, some points we can make then. So urban sprawl, as we said, the uncontrolled growth. A brownfield site is a site where it's been used before, so it's subject to dereliction. So when you're building, say if you wanted to build a factory, you've got two choices. You can either build on a fresh field which has never been touched before, or one that has been touched before and it's probably got some toxic remainings, it's an old factory site there, etc. Yes, lack of investment due to lack of interest, and it takes a lot more money. It's much more expensive to develop a brownfield site. Okay. So, how has urban sprawl affected? No worries. How has urban sprawl affected Liverpool? Well, there's been a lot of building on the rural greenfield land. I'll try and talk about Stratford whilst I'm going through it. So there's been a lot of building on greenfield sites. Now that's not nice because we want to keep those sites. That's reducing the biodiversity of those areas, because all of the nature that lives in those areas are being destroyed. Just because it's cheaper, businesses do it, and therefore it's purposefully ignoring the areas which have been which are brown sites, which have been ignored and have loads of factories on it, but no one is touching them. So there's a lot of issues with that. Another impact of urban sprawl is looking at commuter settlements. I'm thinking of for the Olympic Park Stratford. So Judah saying 40% of the park was made of recyclable materials. Yep, I think we went there once. And it was that. On top of that, in terms of urban sprawl there, it was there was a lot of building on greenfield sites for the Olympics as opposed to regenerating the brownfield sites. And that's why that's why we went and did our paper 3 field work there, because there were two areas of contrast. There was very derelict areas and very new areas, and most of the new areas were built on greenfield sites. Yeah, Westfield shopping mall, 5,000 jobs, positive multiplier effect. Good point there. Okay. So commuter settlements is the other point that I was making. So they are basically places where they are slightly on outside, so they are on the rural to urban fringe. Okay, so i.e. on the edges, and everybody who lives in these commuter settlements, they effectively commute out of these towns, and therefore they work elsewhere. And the settlements can be quite negative, because if everybody is commuting out, and Liverpool struggles with this problem, or in the rural to urban fringe, a lot of people are commuting out. So if they're commuting out, this means that the people who the economy, the local economy suffers, because there's not enough workforce, there's not a sufficient workforce for those people living there. On top of that, the demand for houses increases, because everybody wants to live there, and because people are getting their money from elsewhere, from cities where they tend to be paid more. When you actually end up there, then when you actually end up in these towns, the house prices skyrocket. But the locals who are not commuting, who are getting perhaps less salaries, they're unable to afford these skyrocketing high house prices. So the house prices become unaffordable for the people who are not commuting. And the local economy suffers, as we spoke about local businesses. And on top of that, obviously, if everybody's commuting, that increases a lot of pollution, and there's a lot of stress on the transport links. Okay, so that's examples of urban sprawling onto the greenfield sites. And if you want to name some places, you've got Orton in Liverpool. And you can talk about the Olympic Park as well. So urban sprawl is specific for talking about greenfield sites, encroaching onto greenfield sites. It's more negative. Whereas a regeneration project is talking about improving. A regeneration project is talking about improving a brownfield site. So that's kind of the difference there. Okay, so we've now done that. And we're now on to our last one, which is urban regeneration project. So again, this is another Liverpool case study question. So let's discuss that there. But again, if you did the Olympic Park and did the urban regeneration, you can use that or any other one that you studied. Woolwich Arsenal. Oh, okay. You guys did some interesting ones then. So for the urban regeneration project in Liverpool, it was called the Anfield Project. Now, regeneration, the definition of it is the redevelopment of an urban area to improve the physical environment and the quality of life for residents. So the aim of regeneration is to improve the physical appearance and the quality of life, or the standard of living, the urban areas. Okay, so you've got the Anfield Project for urban regeneration. So Anfield, this is the area where they were selling houses for just £1. It was one of the most deprived areas in England. Most of the homes were substandard or derelict. They were vacant for more than 5 years. They were being sold. The area had many economic and social problems, high unemployment, a lot of crime. So, urban regeneration, what you want to talk about is the old issues that they had. And this is probably standard across whatever one you've studied. So, you can talk about the crime, the derelict housing, you can talk about the unemployment, and you can talk about how houses were being sold for £1 in Anfield. Okay, so how was this fixed eventually? So that was the Anfield project. It was an urban regeneration project. They spent 260 million. This is not pre-recorded, as Frosty always comes to say. They spent 260 million on this project. So it was Liverpool City Council, it was Liverpool Football Club, and it was your housing group. So they all came together and did that. And they had loads of benefits from this. So there was social benefits, economic benefits, environmental benefits. So we spoke about the problems. We're now going to speak about the benefits of the scheme. Okay, so 300 derelict houses were refurbished, and there are plans for 600 new homes in Liverpool. There was the Anfield Sports and Community Centre that was refurbished. And also, if you do the Olympic Park, then they had a lot of the sports centres refurbished as well. So they tend to try and support community spirit. So anything that strives for that, that's what these regeneration projects do. A new high street planned and a £10 million hotel. And then environmental features, you've got Stanley Park. Now, the parks have a positive impact on the mental health of the locals. The footpath was improved, the dead trees were replaced. Etc. Now, a 4.5 million environmental scheme started in 2017, aiming to narrow roads and create wider tree-lined pavements and a pedestrian-friendly area. Okay. And that is the Urban Regeneration Project. Can you use Bristol for this? This is the case study where it's called Change in UK Cities. Yeah, but Jude is generally right. You can use any, but you need to be careful that you don't use the wrong one. You can use Stratford as well. Well done. Okay. So that's section A done. Let's move on to section B, which is going to be a little bit more quicker now. Measures of development. So there's different ways to measure development. You've got the different strategies. You've got gross national income per capita, birth rate, death rate. So let's quickly go through them. They would never ask you a large mark question on this because there's not really too much to say. So measures of development, you've got GNI, which is the gross national income, the total value of all of the, you just need to be able to define them. So GNI is the total value of all of the goods and services produced by a country in a year, including income from overseas. It's often given in US dollars. Next, GNI per capita. So this is just GNI divided by the population. What are limitations of GNI per capita? Well, this is just all of the total value of all of the goods and services produced divided by the population. But is that true? In reality, it's not an equal split between everybody. There's income inequality. Most of the resources are being profited by the minority. They are making the most money. Next, you've also got birth rate, and that then brings death rate as well. Sometimes you also have infant mortality rate, which is slightly sad. So the difference between birth rate and infant mortality rate is that birth rate is the number of live births per 1,000, and infant mortality rate is the number of babies who die before they are 1 year old. That's quite sad. And then death rate is the number of deaths per 1,000 of the population per year. It's important to get these definitions spot on. Next, you have people per doctor, which, as the name suggests, the average number of people per doctor. Literacy rate. Yes, for infant mortality, it's per 1,000 babies born, unfortunately. Okay, so literacy rate, which is the percentage of adults who can read and write. And then you've got access to safe water. Or potable water, which is the percentage of people who can get clean drinking water. And then finally, life expectancy. Now, life expectancy is the average age a person can expect to live up to. Now, limitations of all of these models, they can be misleading, as I spoke about with GNI per capita or per head. And also, you need to think about whether they are qualitative measures or quantitative measures. So, qualitative looks at the quality. So, things like, most of these are quantitative. They're giving a figure. And they can be misleading. So you need to think about all of the different types of indicators, the social indicators. For example, if you think about countries that have low birth rates, it normally suggests that they're more developed because they have access to contraception and healthcare. You don't need to know all of the limitations, you just need to be aware of just generally what could be wrong with them because you could be asked that. So, a country that has a low birth rate, we often assume that that is a highly developed country. However, Cuba is a country that has a low birth rate. Therefore, that is still a less developed country. So we can't just use the indicators in isolation. You need to use a combination of them, and that's why the best one is a Human Development Index, as it takes into account multiple different features into one. So looking at the Human Development Index, which is always painted as the best one to use, although that does have limitations as well. So the Human Development Index, HDI, takes into account several different measures. It uses income, so GNI per capita. It also uses life expectancy, education level. So 3 different measures there, and each of the values are a value between 0 and 1. So the more closer it is to 1, the more developed that area is. Gudnor said, could you also say that in different countries the currencies have different worths, like 3,000 USD annually? Exactly. However, you can't necessarily say that with actually, no, that's a good point. That is a very good point. You can say that because you can say since GNI is calculated using US dollars, you get a loss in conversion rate. For example, if $5 in India would take you a lot further than it would in the United States of America. Okay. So if you get a question which is talking about what is the best measurement of development, always mention HDI, Human Development Index. As Jude says in there, takes into account multiple indicators such as GNI and life expectancy. Well done. Okay. Let's now move on to the limitations of the demographic transition model, the DTM. Goodbye, good night, see you. GNI is a spread, it's like an average, so not showcasing individual circumstance. Yes, Elliot, that's the one that we said as well. Okay, so let's now look at limitations of the DTM. A lot of people forget what the demographic transition model is all about. So this is effectively using population pyramids, and using that to show how birth rates and death rates affect population growth. So when you have a higher birth rate than death rate, then that means the population is growing. That's called natural increase. Key for you to remember. Natural increase just means when the birth rate is greater than the death rate, i.e. more people are being born, and therefore it's a type of population increase. Thank you, Sean. Yeah, geography is on Wednesday. Okay, so that's called natural increase and therefore natural decrease. Hopefully that's a little bit intuitive. So that means that the birth rate is less than the death rate. So looking at the demographic transition model now, which as you said shows how birth rates and death rates affect population growth. Let me try and get a picture of it here so you can see. Here you go. So this is an example of a demographic transition model. Okay, you can see how initially, well, as you go across effectively, what you get to is a more developed economy. So you've got the 4 different stages. In some books, it's shown as 5. So initially, you've got births and deaths per 1,000. So I can pin the Discord link. Okay, so initially the population is high and fluctuating. The population growth rate is pretty much going crazy, and there's a lot of people being born, but the population size, there's a lot of people dying at the same time. Now, as you go across, you can see that the birth rate still remains quite high, but the death rate starts to fall as there's greater access to medical healthcare resources. And then as you keep going forward, I guess you can't see my mouse, but as you keep going forward anyway, the birth rate starts to fall as you have access to contraception in healthcare. The death rate keeps falling as you've got access to medical resources, and therefore the population growth is starting to slow down. Jude, it's okay. Stop attacking Jude, everybody. He was just trying to help you guys. Okay. And then the population starts becoming low and fluctuating. And then sometimes what happens is the death rate starts to overtake the birth rate. And then you have a declining population. Okay. So that is the demographic transition model. But we're being asked, what are the limitations of the demographic transition model? So let's see what we can say. Firstly, let me go onto here. Okay. Firstly, we can talk about how it doesn't take into account migration, which is a huge determinant of population growth, especially as migrants are much more likely to have lots of children as opposed to the domestic people from the country. Therefore, they have a great influence on the birth and death rates. Other limitations of the demographic transition model, there are outliers. So not every country fits in with that trend of having, as the development increases, as the development of a country increases, the population starts to decline, because economic development doesn't necessarily correlate with access to healthcare, because there can be a lot of inequality and poverty. So we can say it doesn't take into account income inequality. Because not everybody is going to have unequal access to resources. And therefore, it's kind of just a model. Okay, so those are the main ideas there. Now, we're going to move on to the next topic. So we've done limitations of the demographic transition model. We're now going to look at the causes of uneven development, why some countries are more developed than others. And this is very intuitive. You should be able to just kind of list them based on what you think. There's a lot of reasons why certain economies are more worse off than others. Well done. I can see some really good answers already. Landlocked, that's a good point. Exactly, war. So you've got geographical reasons, as people are saying. If you are landlocked, that means you can't have any ports. And ports for most economies is a massive part about trade. So you can't do trade via ports. Your economic development is limited now. Colonization, so historical reasons. Well done, you guys are getting this really well. Colonization. I really love how you all are typing in the chat. I think it's really amazing. Keep it going, everybody. So colonization, that has heavily influenced which economies and areas are much more developed than others. For example, if you look at England, as a main example, they went and colonized a lot of countries. They went and sort of put themselves on their own throne, suggesting that they deserve to get everybody else's resources. Yep, well done for everybody saying natural disasters as well. So again, I guess that's a geographical point. Poor trade links. So what are reasons for poor trade links? As people are saying, war. That's a reason for poor trade links. World trade patterns as well. You tend to trade with who you're trading with. It takes a lot of legislation and paperwork to have to switch trading partners, and you're not going to do it if you know that they're a poor country. So there's a lot, as people are saying, there's a lot of prejudice towards poorer countries. Why would you want to trade with a country you know is not going to give it back? The chat, this is so funny. Okay. Yeah, the Commonwealth as well. Okay. And also the access to the resources that an economy has. Everybody, what do you associate the Middle East with? They associate it with oil. Okay? The Middle East is literally lucky that they have this resource that they can effectively ration to the rest of the world. So places, and America as well, the United States has a lot of oil. So getting their resources back, or having resources in the first place just because of geographically, that is a really good point. So these are all of the causes of uneven development. There's still a lot more, as people are saying. Weather, yep. There's a lot of personal struggle in the chat. I feel it. Okay. Okay, so that's causes of uneven development. We're now going to look at microfinance loans. So I'm going to go back to the question to see what that was about. Koh-i-Noor diamond, yeah. That is interesting. Oh, wait. Yeah, let me try and find the question on microfinance. So, the definition of microfinance, you should be aware of that. Microfinance loans are when money is sent to low-income countries to help them develop. These are often small loans with reasonable interest rates. Perfect, Jude. Etc. So yeah, small loans if issued at affordable interest rates. So if you were asked to define this, that's just the only point that we're going to talk about here. If you're asked to define microfinance, try and mention the point where it's small loans as your first mark, and then low interest rates as your second mark. Yeah, you don't need to necessarily know a case study for microfinance, but well done for those of you who are. It is always good if you know an example of something just to drop it in there, name drop it, because you could get a mark for that. So it's definitely worth doing that. Okay, we're now looking at tourism in low-income countries and how that helps to reduce the development gap. So there's the one about Kenya. So tourism in Kenya helps to increase its development. I don't know what ones that you guys did on this, but yeah, Elliot, I agree with you. Jamaica, okay. Interesting. It's got some nice tropical places here. So let's go through this. Tourism in low-income countries. Look how much work we've done, guys. Amazing. I'll try and be as fast as possible. So it was looking at how that helps to reduce the development gap. Rami said tourism contributes to 4% of the GDP. Amazing. Tunisia, yeah, I know. That is the other one that most people have done as well. Tunisia, Kenya, Jamaica. Okay. So Kenya is a lower income country. It's found in East Africa. It's quite useful to know this information if you were asked a big marker on this. It attracts tourists. Why do people want to go there? So you could be asked for the reasons for tourism. So why do people want to go to Kenya? Well, there's this idea of it being tropical, the safari. There's a lot of wildlife, the warm temperatures. How another reason is actually the unspoilt scenery. There's not been a lot of building and machinery and work on there. Culture as well. Good point, everybody. So those are the reasons for going there. Now, how has the government tried to help boost tourism? What is the strategies that they've done? So the boosting strategies, i.e., how did they incentivize people around the world to travel to Kenya? Well, they did it by cutting down visa fees by 50%. Making it cheaper to visit the country. They also scrapped for children to under 16, so no visas for them required. On top of that, there were landing fees at airports on the Kenyan coast completely dropped as well. And therefore, because of all of these, the tourism started to increase from 0.9 million visitors in 1995 to 1.4 million in 2017. Tudley pre-release. Yeah, last year's pre-release was actually quite a fun one when I did a video on it, but this year's is a bit more boring. But I made a video either way which will help you, so use it. And I made a really good PDF which you guys should access. It's free. Okay, continuing forward. So we've got, now we need to talk about the benefits of it, of tourism, and then the negatives of tourism, because there's always negatives. Let me make a nice aesthetic table. You have the predicted on Tudley if you like that awesomeness. That would be great. I mean, I think it would help you guys a lot, and that would be a really nice thing to do. So thank you. You're so lovely and want to help everybody. It's really nice. Can't wait to do the Kahoot. I'll try and hurry up and we can do that. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got benefits, costs of tourism. So benefits and costs. So benefits of tourism. Yeah, we'll finish it. Oh, don't worry. Benefits of tourism, it directly contributes, as people are saying, to 4% of Kenya's GDP. So it's becoming a reliable source of income. Although there's obviously costs in that. If you're over relying on tourism, that can be quite bad. Okay, 1.1 million people are directly or indirectly employed. So greater employment. On top of that, businesses and Kenya's government have invested in transport infrastructure, so it encourages government investment. And also, because a lot of the tourism is surrounding the nature and a lot of national parks, because they charge fees, it means that they are actually spending the money cultivating more wildlife. So it's quite sustainable. Okay, and then the costs of this, only a very small proportion of the money goes back to the locals. So the big companies tend to just give the money, feed the money back to wherever they come from in other countries. So it's only a small proportion of the profits. Well done, Rami. And on top of that, some communities have been forced off their land. Tourist vehicles damage the environment. So there's obviously the environmental issues, for example, soil erosion, because a lot of footpaths are being eroded. On top of that, there are lots of emissions. Dividends are when profits go out of the country. Is that what you're talking about? Or imports, exports? Oh, are you talking about there's another one as well, actually. There is remittance income. So that's another one if you guys don't know what that means. So remittance income is effectively when you are paying back you're effectively paying back your money, remittance income. So whatever you earn, it goes back to your family. For example, immigrants who come to the UK, they may get a job and earn an income, earn a salary, and they then may send that back to their families in India or wherever they come from. But it's very common for Indian households and very family orientated cultures. So remittance income is a good one to do as well. Okay, so we've looked at benefits and costs, so that's that topic done. We're now looking, oh, where are we here? We're now looking at transnational corporations. Generally, what are they? Yes, subsistence farming. Subsistence farming is when you are just farming just enough to make your own food and supply your own resources. So we're going to look at transnational corporations now. This is part of a case study. So whether you learnt about India as one of them, or you learnt about Shell in Nigeria or any other ones. So that will be quite important to learn. So, on Unilever as well. So, what are transnational corporations? Hopefully, you should be able to define this term. Transnational corporations are companies that operate in more than one country apart from its country of origination. So, operates in more than one country apart from its original. So, TNC factories are usually located in lower income countries. Why is that? Well, they can effectively exploit the cheap labor. So why is this done? So for the case studies, because some people are asking what counts as a case study, you would have learned all about India, okay, as a case study. So it's not just specifically on transnational corporations. You would have learned about a bit about its development, about its political, social, cultural background. You would have learned about how its economic industrial structure is changing, transnational corporations, how globalization has impacted it, how it receives different types of aid, the quality of life. So you would have learned about a lot of different things, and then this is just a honed in version of it. So one of the topics that you would have learned. So the entire case study is for India. So that's how that works. So why do transnational corporations work there? Because they want to exploit the cheap labor. Perhaps on top of that, there is underused resources. Therefore, they may be cheaper. For example, a lot of transnational corporations go into Africa, and they do that because they know that there's a lot of oil resources that the locals aren't able to use because they don't have the facilities. So they are going to then take them and benefit from them. Now, normally, the headquarters of the transnational corporations are located in the country of origin or in high income countries like the United States, like places like London. And many of them do most of their actual manufacturing in these cheaper labor countries. So Unilever is the main one for India. Is Rio de Janeiro one? Well, it depends. If you learn all about Rio de Janeiro and then learn specifically about the transnational corporations, then that might work as well. So you should be able to understand the difference between an example and a case study. A case study is an entire thing where you learn about various different topics like this, and an example is where you're pinpointed specifically to something. For example, when we looked at Kenya tourism, it was a small example. Okay, so we're now going to look at the advantages and disadvantages of transnational corporations. Sorry, Arabella, I know this. I thought that the exam was tomorrow for geography, but it's not. But we will be doing another live as well. I mean, this is going to end when we get through all of them because I know some people are eager to go through all of the predicted parts. So I'm sorry if it's going to take a bit of time. This can be applied to Ethiopia if there is a transnational corporation there. Okay, so looking at the advantages and disadvantages. So advantages include that they provide employment. For example, Unilever employs 16,000 people in India. As people are saying, there are loads of jobs for the locals there. On top of that, they have to pay taxes, Because they are gaining formal employment, they're working for the formal economy rather than the informal economy, they have to then pay taxes, and that is providing government revenue. Okay. And then on top of that, we've got some TNCs run program to increase the development in India. For example, Unilever did a project called Project Shakti. And Project Shakti helped poor women in rural areas become entrepreneurs. There's a lot of microfinance schemes as well. There are now 75,000 women in this scheme, and Unilever has worked with charities to improve sanitation for 140 million people. Okay, now disadvantages include that a lot of the profits, I know it says here some of the profits, but a lot of the profits leave the actual country. They go back to the country of origin. Okay. And on top of that, so if all the profits are leaving, you're effectively using all of the resources from India, and all you're giving them is the cheap labor wages, and you're not actually benefiting their economy. TNCs also may close operations very rapidly and move. They have no allegiance to staying there, so they have no cultural incentive to staying there. So all of a sudden they can leave and then all of the jobs go. It's very unreliable. They can obviously cause environmental issues, lots of factories creating and contributing to water pollution, depleting a lot of the country's supplies, and then simply move to another country once the restrictions get too tight. Another disadvantage is the exploitation of the labor. So you've got the overuse of the labor, and you've got the overuse of the capital, the equipment, the manufacturing machines, everything like that. Poor working conditions, Yasmin, that's a good point there. In Nigeria, the oil rigs that Shell own are targeted by militants, part of the NDA. Okay, that's interesting, Elliot. Okay. So that is probably all you can talk about with transnational corporations. And on the last point for section B, explain how modern industry that should be can be sustainable for the environment. So this is a specific example that you should be able to link to. So I learnt about the unicorn group. This was a really small example actually, so I can probably put it on the page here. So modern industrial, so you've got the unicorn group. Talk about how Shell had to pay 6.9 billion to the Adoni people or something who was affected by the oil leakages damaging farmland. Wow, I did not know that, but the oil leakages for Shell. And I guess they probably paid it, but there was a lot of corruption behind that as well with Shell. I remember seeing that. Okay, so for modern industrial, so you've got the Unicorn Group, which is effectively a manufacturing, yeah, the sheet will be available, manufacturing company. They produce lots of products, and they are based in Lisbon, Northern Ireland. Now, it made its production very sustainable. So what they did was they made 100% of its electricity gained from renewable resources, i.e. solar panels, also wind as well. And also they recycled all of its waste and its leftover steel and plastic, because remember, in manufacturing there's a loss of waste from the offcuts, so you need to make sure that that's being quite sustainable. Okay, and that's pretty much all you can say about that one. They can't ask you a massive question on that because the specification doesn't require you to know too much about that example. We're now moving on to section C. Well done everybody for staying this far. Now, for this, you either do food, water, and energy. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a let's do a vote, a poll to see if you guys want to continue and go through the rest of section C, or do you want to do a Kahoot, or do you want to end the live? I'm going to do a poll on YouTube so you guys can go on the community tab and answer that. Okay, the poll is now up and running, so you should be able to access that. If you can answer in the poll, that would be good, because then you can't keep answering, so it's easier to see what you guys, majority of you guys, want to do. Thank you, Jude. Yep, if you just click on that link, you'll be able to answer the poll. Oh, it seems to be very 50-50. Half of you want to do section C, the other half of you wanted to do a Kahoot. I've got an idea. I will run a Kahoot, and those of you who want to play the Kahoot can play that. Otherwise, we can continue going on to section C, but I guess maybe some of you who want to do the Kahoot want to go over that as well. It's 59% Kahoot right now. Okay, so we'll do Kahoot. And then section C. Okay, but I'm going to have to end this live at 9 o'clock. So what I will do is I'll place a Kahoot for those of you who want to do that. And then for those of you who don't want to do a Kahoot, you can keep watching and we'll be doing section C. So we'll do both at the same time. Okay? Why are you going to cry? Don't worry, I'm doing both at the same time. So if you want to play the Kahoot, you can play the Kahoot. If you want to do section C, you can do this section C. Compromise. Give me a second. Okay. I'll share the link for the Kahoot, and if you don't want to do that, absolutely fine. You can keep watching me as we go through that. Okay? Why can't I do this outside of 9? Because I'm gonna go to sleep because I have to wake up early. I've got a life outside of helping. Yeah, I do have a life, surprisingly enough. Okay, let's keep going back onto that. I'll start the Kahoot for those of you who want to do that. So, yep, of course I'll be doing a live tomorrow. I'm secretly a millionaire in Dubai. I wish. You know what? I actually sleep at 8 normally, but look at the sacrifice I'm doing for you guys. Since lives, my sleep schedule has been non-existent. I wish I was a billionaire. Okay, let's continue. Thank you guys for being here, even though there's some interesting comments. It's quite entertaining, actually, so keep them coming. Okay, let's continue now. Section C, let's push through. I love you guys. Aww. Okay, I'll start the Kahoot now, since most people have joined. Let's continue. So, I sound young. I appreciate that. Well, I don't really know if I do, but okay. Agribuses in the UK. So, what are agribuses? These are large-scale, money-intensive agriculture or food production. So, I thought this was about another country. Did you learn in the UK? Oh no, yeah, you did. Okay. Agribuses in the UK. Yeah, Big John is making me laugh despite the sometimes very questionable comments, but okay. Agribuses in the UK. So agribuses are effectively just large-scale agricultural systems. So in terms of the UK, where they've existed since the 1960s, and they are basically controlled by large firms. This means that farms in the UK have been changing. So, key things to realize: how are farms, small scale farms, becoming more industrialized, while agribuses are kind of taking over. They're grouping all of the little farms into one big farm and basically forming a monopoly where they own almost everything. So farm sizes have increased. They're taking up more land, especially for in terms of cattle farming and things like that. They are taking more grazing areas so that they can increase their yield of crop, so they can then produce it more cheaply, because when there's a greater supply, people are willing to pay less for it. Now, on top of that, when we look at agribuses, there's also lots of use of chemicals, which you probably heard about when they're growing food in order to make this much more tasty. So and also make it work. So when you have artificial fertilizers, when you have pesticides, you're applying them, you're encouraging growth, but you're also effectively artificially making it artificially, it's very unnatural, and there can be some consequences of that. For example, it reduces the biodiversity, and on top of that, if you're constantly cultivating only one crop, you're becoming overly dependent on that. And then if you had a disease that wiped that out, then obviously you can see the biology links there. It will wipe the whole crop out. On top of this, you've also got the number of people employed in agriculture that actually fell. So this is because there's a lot of use of machinery. So because there's greater employment of machinery, there's lower employment. Even though agriculture is an integral part of the UK as well, because if we're over reliant on other countries for food, for example, we saw when we were reliant on countries like Ukraine for wheat, because a lot of people didn't know, but Ukraine was the main supplier of wheat in the entire of Europe. So once the war happened and there was rationing effectively, we had to then completely change our supply. So having agribuses in the UK means there's a more secure way of doing it. Okay, so that is all you really do need to know. We're now going to look at sustainable energy in terms of the food, in terms of just general. So sorry, I just forgot about the Kahoot because I need to keep changing the questions and I forget. Sorry about that. Okay, so sustainable energy, just generally for resources. This is quite general. So, I mean, obviously, with electricity, you can generate it from fossil fuels. Carbon dioxide, you've probably heard of this a million times, but when you've got fossil fuels, they release terrible emissions into the environment: carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, acid rain, all of these things. So, they're the downsides. On top of that, fossil fuels will one day run out. Yep, these lives are also my only social life as well. So, at the moment, I will miss you guys as well. Don't make me sad. Okay. But with sustainable energy, you've also got this idea that you're using renewable resources, for example, wind, that will be continuous. On top of that, especially in the UK, where we have the strongest winds in the world, I don't know if you knew that, it's quite useful to have that. Okay. I will be doing A levels, don't worry, so I'll still be here with you. Yeah. So in the predicted paper, there was emphasis on wind turbines, so you can use that fact if you want. And now you need to remember which one of these three you do. Do you do organic food? Do you do water? Or do you do energy? You need to do two of them. Sorry, I don't know if I said one. You do two of them. So make sure you remember which ones you do. I'm going to be going through all of them so you can just tune out for the one that you don't do. So option 1 is food. So looking at organic farming. Somebody emailed me the predicted paper. Look at how they're helping their fellow students. You only do one? You only do one? Are you sure? Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. In my GCSE, I answered both of them. Wow. Okay. Okay, perfect. I can't believe I answered both of them. And I still did well. Wow. No wonder the timing was so tight. Okay. Let's do all of them anyway. So I'll kind of talk through them. Organic farming, for those of you who do that. So let me find it. Yeah, I was that one kid doing all 6 themes. I definitely wasn't that kid. Wow. I can't believe you guys are telling me after all these years. Okay, organic farming. So, organic farming uses natural processes to return nutrients to the soil so that the crops can continue to be grown. For example, crops, animals, and empty areas are rotated, and natural fertilizers, for example, cow manure, are used. These are less damaging to the environment. Artificial herbicides and pesticides, they are not used. So when we're talking about organic farming, that is kind of the opposite of agribuses. Agribuses are talking about everything. When we're talking about agribuses, we're talking about large scale manufacturing of loads of different resources. When we're talking about organic farming, we're talking about focusing on the quality instead, as opposed to the quantity being produced. So natural processes, no use of artificial fertilizers. The plants aren't given extra supplements or vaccinations. This reduces the reliance on them, and it protects biodiversity as well. And on top of that, organic farmers sell their produce locally, and they try and reduce the number of food miles, i.e. the distance that the food has to travel in order to get there. Is NPK artificial? It is viewed as artificial, which is quite ironic, as a fertilizer. I mean, actually, no, sorry. I would disagree with that. Sorry. It's not a pesticide and it's not a herbicide. So I guess it can be used because fertilizers are used to still cultivate it. But I guess it is artificial. So it kind of sits in both camps there. Okay, so that is organic farming. Next up, a local scheme in a newly emerging economy to increase the sustainable supply of food. So the example here is in Mali. They use agroforestry to produce a sustainable food supply. So what do? So Kutiala is a region of Mali which is a low-income country, many local farmers have begun to use agroforestry techniques to make their food supply more sustainable. So because Mali is a very dry country, intensive use of land for farming is causing desertification, making the land less fertile. So, to combat this, farmers have started to plant staple crops like maize in amongst the trees and nitrogen fixing plants. So, they're growing agricultural crops amidst the forestry so that they can benefit from all of the nutrients that they're gaining from them. Okay, because as the leaves from those trees fall, they create a sort of recyclable organic fertilizer for the soil, which provides all of the nutrients and it helps to therefore combat the desertification. It is a natural process and therefore it's going to be quite sustainable. Now, the plants add nitrogen to the soil, so you do not need any artificial soil, NPK fertilizers, for example. So the added nitrogen means that you do not need NPK fertilizers. And they also increase the nutrient and water content of the soil so that they don't have to rely on constantly being watered. And therefore the overall system has increased the yield of maize, the key crop, at the same time as protecting the soil and encouraging the growth of the forestry as well. Okay. So that is the local scheme. Now we're going to look at technology that can be used for improving food security. So technology for improving food security. So this is another example. Which is irrigation in Burkina Faso. Oh, Shay, you're so cute. Okay, anyway. So Burkina Faso is a low-income country in West Africa. Around 30% of the population rely on agriculture for employment. The climate is quite hot and dry. There's a short rainy season and there's limited water for irrigation and malnutrition is widespread. The population is rising as well. So how can technology be used in order to make this work? Well, they use dams and reservoirs. A certain one has been built, and it's called the Bagre Dam and Irrigation System. So the dam was built in 1993 on the White Volta River, about 150 kilometers from the country's capital. It stores 1.7 billion meters cubed of water. Okay, 1.4 billion meters cubed of water. That is that dam and reservoir there, an irrigation system. And because of that, it is quite effective. On top of that, they also built canals to carry the water for irrigation as well. Now, advantages and disadvantages of the technology. Well, advantages, by 2017, gravity-based irrigation systems provided reliable water. 18,000 hectares of paddy fields had been created. Hydropower was also being used as well. and this created 1,500 jobs. Disadvantages, however, the project aimed to irrigate 30,000 hectares. However, that was only achieving 10% of it. On top of that, the irrigation canals had not been well maintained, leading to water loss and decreased productivity. And on top of that, there was also expensive water charges as well. So it was hard to pay for that. Okay. I would send the predicted paper, but I don't want to get copyrighted, so can't do that. Okay. So that's that is the technology side of things. Next, we're on to water availability. What time do I wake up? I wake up at 4. Anyway, I should probably hurry up. Okay, I'm going to do one more because I have not got the energy. So do you want to do water or do you want to do energy? Change in accent? Did I change my accent? Oh. Energy, water. I'm trying to count how many people are saying that. I see most people saying water. I don't know if it's just the same people saying it over. So we'll do water instead. Okay. So water availability. Going over that quickly, I'll just do it verbally. So what is water insecurity? Water insecurity is when you don't have enough potable water to drink. It's important to have a reliable, sustainable source of water, good quality water to meet the people's needs. So if you have excess water, that's called water surplus. And then if you have not enough water, it's called water deficit. So water deficit causes water insecurity and water surplus causes water security. It's important to know the different definitions there. Water security depends on factors like the amount of water available, rainfall, rivers, groundwater, the number of people using the water, i.e., population pressure, how much access you have to the water. I don't know if you remember this or were affected by it, but when there was issues with the amount of rainfall in the summer, people could not use their hose pipes, the hose pipe ban. And another key term that you need to be sure about is water stress. That is when the demand for water exceeds the supply for water during a certain period. So therefore, the water is not of high enough quality to use. Okay, looking at desalination now. So desalination is a system used to effectively take the salt out of water so you can then use that. So it's taking the salt from seawater. Now, there are two main processes for doing desalination. It's really similar to doing distillation, literally almost the same, just on a wider industrial scale. So, you've got that the seawater is heated until it evaporates, and that then leaves the salt behind. It's then condensed as fresh water, and then it passes through a membrane that removes the salt. Wealthy desert countries often use desalination as the main source of clean drinking water. 98.8% of Dubai's water is supplied through desalination, and this is a really expensive process, so you can imagine how rich this Middle Eastern country is. It has the region's largest supply plant, which produces up to 140 million gallons of desalinated water every day. Desalination is expensive because energy is needed to heat the seawater or to force it through the membranes. Most desalination plants are also powered via the fossil fuels, and therefore, Saudi Arabia, however, is building the first large-scale solar-powered desalination plant. Okay, now looking at a local scheme in a low-income country or newly emerging economy to increase the sustainable supply of water. So, an example of this local scheme is actually Kenya. So, Kenya is using sand dams in order to create a sustainable water supply. Okay, and because Kenya is a hot, dry country in East Africa, most of the rainfall is just a few downpours every year. Most rivers only flow during the rainy season, and in the dry season, the water evaporates, which makes it difficult for rural communities to store water for future use. People have to travel between 6 to 9 hours every day just for water. So, there was an organization called the UDO, which is the Utoni Development Organization, um, with aid from other organizations that worked to reduce water insecurity in Kenya. What did they do? They installed sand dams in several rural areas. So, what did this do? This gave the local community access to water all year round. So, how did it work? Well, sand dams are effectively a low dam, they're only 1 meter high, and they're built across the river. During the rainy season, when water is flowing into the river, the coarse material is trapped behind the behind the dam. Water is then trapped between the sand particles. About a third of it is trapped behind the dam is actually water. So it's effectively using sand to trap the water and prevent it from evaporating in the hot, dry sun. Goodbye, V1. When the river stops flowing, water can be extracted from the sand by digging a well, by piping water through the dam to a tap, or simply by digging holes. And because they used foreign aid, it's not costing the locals. On top of that, the water can be used for irrigation to grow crops, since a lot of the country is reliant on that for agriculture. And the height of the dam can be raised in order to trap more sand and have more water. Okay, so we've looked at that, and now the final bit is looking at water conservation in the UK. So, water conservation, what is it? Well, as the name suggests, it's about using less water. So, anything from fixing leaks in reservoirs, pipes, and taps in order to prevent water wastage, fitting dual flush toilets or devices in the toilet system to prevent extra water from leaving. So, i.e., those toilets where you have two buttons on them, so one for a deeper flush and one for a small one. Um, On top of that, irrigating farmland using drip pipes or sprays directly onto where the water needs to access. Fitting homes and businesses with water meters, charging for metered water raises awareness of water use and makes more people likely to reduce their water usage. Educating people to have shorter showers and turn off taps when they aren't in use. For example, the Los Angeles system of Save the Drop which is a campaign using a video to highlight some common ways that people waste water. Okay, so that is the end there. I'm sorry I didn't get to go over energy, but we went over most of the content. Tomorrow we're going to do another live. It'll be more exam question focused, going over past papers. Thank you everybody for attending and joining in. Just looking at the results for the Kahoot, for those of you who were joining in. Third place, you have John. Well done. Second place, you have Yum. And first, you have Carlane. Well done. Fourth, Bob. And fifth, Green. Okay, well done, everybody. I'll try and make this document of predictions available to you guys soon. I'm going to go to sleep now, but it was lovely seeing you here. I love you guys so much, and I'm going to go to sleep. I'll see you in the second geography live tomorrow. Goodbye, and good luck for people doing Spanish and history.